Welcome. I'm Jennifer Simpson, COO of Galway Sustainable Capital. We're thrilled to have you here and folks today. And we're also thrilled and interested in hearing what you all have to say about what you've been doing in Maryland. So welcome to the Maryland Sustainability Showcase. I just wanted to say, I asked who's attended other climate events so far this week. Okay, great. I attended a few things yesterday. It sounds like there are 140 events possible, so it's possible to get to them all. 3,500 people have registered, or 200 volunteers, so maybe some of you are in the audience can do the way that you have. I wanted to give a special shout out to Davina on the screen. We are recording this, but on Sunday evening, I decided to kick my climate week off by walking into town. I live in Alexandria, to the Patagonia, where we were hosting a community event. And I met Janina and her mom, who had driven in from Howard County. She's a third-year student at a university in Maryland, and was very interested, but couldn't make it today because she's got class and other things. So we wanted to tie her in and have her understand to put her in mind. And I know she's going to time. With that, I'd like to introduce our CEO, also Jennifer von Bismarck. Great, thank you. Well, I wanted to say welcome to everybody. I'm Jennifer von Bismarck. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Galway Sustainable Capital, and we are thrilled to be your host today. Our company, we are a specialty finance company. Our headquarters is here in Washington, D.C. We're about 25 people, and we invest broadly in sustainable solutions. And that means everything we look at has to have a positive environmental or social benefit before we'll even take a look. And then once we have decided to consider an investment to maximize our risk-adjusted return, so we are a market rate investor, and we invest broadly across the transition space. So that means renewable power, green buildings, mobility, circular economy solutions, nature-based solutions, carbon. Carbon is an asset class. Those are the types of things that we're investing in. We tend to look at real assets and infrastructure-like investments. So we like to build things. We like downside protection. So we're not a venture capitalist. We're really about deploying capital and putting solutions and infrastructure in place. So we're really thrilled to be here hosting everyone who's talking about great case studies of climate solutions and climate benefits. And we're really thrilled to have this distinguished panel today. And I know I will want to say first, thank you to the sponsors, which is Vicinity Energy. And hosted by the Greater Baltimore Climate Summit, and we're pleased to have Senator Benbrook here today. Also, we're talking about we have a lot of other distinguished guests in the audience, and we're looking forward to a great discussion. So again, we're thrilled to host you. We have a lot of people from Galway walking around. Feel free to stop them and ask them any questions if there's anything relevant, and we're looking forward to the discussion. Thank you all.
Hi everybody, I'm Free, the Greater Baltimore Climate Summit. I just want to say thank you guys so much for coming. This is incredible. This panel is going to be full of nuggets for you all. And I want to definitely give a shout out to Marissa and the Rental League Conservation Voters for being the most amazing partner one could have. So we're going to get started. I want to give it over to Iman, who's with Progressive Maryland, and she'll introduce the rest of the panel. She's going to be the moderator. Really excited. Give everybody a round of applause.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Iman Habib. I'm a climate policy analyst with Progressive Maryland, which is a social nonprofit that aims to, as the name suggests, build a more progressive Maryland state. We do that putting working class and low income folks in decision-making spaces. We work a lot in housing justice, economic justice, healthcare justice, and also environmental justice. I also represent Progressive Maryland in the Climate Partners Coalition, which is essentially a group of environmental organizations that work to implement the Climate Solutions Now Act in the state of Maryland. And I'm really excited to be here with you today and moderating. And I know that there are we have a fabulous panel, a lot of speakers and leaders in the climate space. So give them all an opportunity to. Okay. My name is Michelle Minnick. I founded Vital Matters 4 years ago, which is an arts-based, interdisciplinary, I call it a laboratory for change, which is kind of the aspirational title of it. But we bring artists and activists and people in the climate and environmental justice space together to build community and educate and have a really good time.
Hi everyone. For the record, I'm Senator Ben Brooks. I represent the 10th legislative district in Baltimore County, which would include, Randallstown, Owensville, and Richardson. Parts of cases, so yeah, I was in the House for 8 years, and this is my third year in the Senate. I serve on triple E's: education, energy, and the environment. All three very, very important subject matters.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenn, Aiosa. I am the Chief of Staff for the Maryland Energy Administration. The Maryland Energy Administration is a state agency that is focused on deploying and delivering clean, reliable, and affordable energy and energy-related greenhouse gas reductions in a just and equitable way. I've been with the administration for about a year. Prior to that, I was the Chief Sustainability Officer for Baltimore County, and I'm a resident of Baltimore City.
Hi, good evening. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Matt O'Malley. I'm from Northern Maryland, way Northern Maryland, Boston, Massachusetts. I do root for the O's when I'm down in the Mid-Atlantic. So, well, I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for Vicinity Energy, which is the district energy system in Baltimore City. Prior to that, I spent 11 years as a member of the Boston City Council, where I helped pass some really impressive energy reporting and later building standards ordinance, which is what actually brought me to Vicinity. Our corporate office is based in Boston. We're in 12 U.S. cities. Our big three are Baltimore, Philly, and Boston. Had the great fortune to work with and get to know some of the incredible leaders that you hear from today. So I'm really excited for this opportunity. Thank you all for joining us on this beautiful early spring day.
Station activities, want to also echo and thank everyone for coming out today. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Yeah, thank you all for all of those introductions. I'm personally really looking forward to learning from all of you and hearing more about all the things you're doing. So I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into the first question. So that is, what makes Maryland special or unique from the perspective of climate change mitigation and adaptation? How have factors unique to Maryland impacted your programs?
So I'm happy to, oh,
No, go ahead, ladies always.
thank you, Senator.
Yes.
So I'm happy to start on that one. I think one of the things that makes Maryland really special and unique are three sort of core policies that have been established in Maryland. So first and foremost, and I think somebody mentioned the Climate Solutions Now Act. This was landmark greenhouse gas reduction legislation that was passed a couple of years ago. Basically putting Maryland on course to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 60% over 2006 levels by 2031 and put us on a path to net zero by 2045. And then there are a variety of policies that have been sort of established to help us implement that law. The second thing is we have a renewable portfolio standard that is requiring our utilities to ramp up clean energy in their portfolios over time. And then the third thing is we are a member of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is basically a regional voluntary carbon market of Mid-Atlantic and Northeastern states. And so those three things, those three policies sort of work really nicely together because it is funding from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative carbon markets and alternative compliance payments associated with our renewable portfolio standard that fund what is called the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. And that is basically what funds the work of the Maryland Energy Administration. So as a state agency, we don't take a single tax dollar. We are completely special funded, and it is the proceeds from that carbon market and from the alternative compliance payments that we then put into climate mitigation, resilience, adaptation, and clean energy to the tune of around $250 million a year. And so we're really sort of putting our money where our mouth is by not only establishing the policies, but then funding the work that we want to see happen to implement those goals.
And if I could articulate on that, what makes Maryland unique is that we're on the front line of climate change. Maryland has over 3,000 miles of shoreline along the Chesapeake and then the Atlantic coast. Sea level rise, flooding, and strong storms aren't distant threats. They are current realities. And then we, and these challenges sort of that force us to be bold and forward thinking. Now we've set some of the most ambitious goals in the country. And then, that was like a net zero emission by 2045, and we're making real investments in renewable energy. Coastal resilience and environmental justice, and being on the education and energy and economic education, energy, and environment. Yeah, going back to my old job. We see ourselves as leaders, and we've got to make this happen. And if you think about some of the challenges that Maryland was faced back in December and January with those utility costs, we only generate 6% of what we're consuming. We need additional generation, and we need something that's easily deployable that will lend itself to solar and at the same time mitigating costs. So this is something that we don't have to wait 5 and 10 years to do. It's deployable in a year or two, if not faster.
Thing I found really inspiring about Maryland is that when you think of motivations or drivers for action on sustainability to happen, it's typically either local or state ordinances can be a great driver, or internal ESG goals that companies and organizations have can be a great driver as well. Really see a confluence in many Maryland businesses, and its leadership, and Governor Moore and his team, Mayor Scott and his team. But really, so many industry leaders, they're saying we need to do this. We're willing to make these critical investments now because ultimately we have no choice. And you can tell people in the room that the action needs to happen now as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So that's been nice to see. You don't find that in every state, sort of those two parallel tracks, because that really is one of the best ways that we can impact change and tackle the climate crisis.
To add to that, if you ask me the most unique thing about Maryland, I'm always going to say Baltimore City. Definitely, I think stated that we are the state's largest city and nationally as a city. We have been early adopters to climate mitigation and adaptation goals, releasing one of the first city-based climate action plans in the nation. Along with, I think Portland, Oregon was an early adopter as well. Oftentimes, Baltimore, some of our legislative priorities, we made the states, which is good because we can kind of be pioneer that test kind of like place for things that then can take effect across the state when it comes to how we are reducing emissions, better waste, improving overall environmental or outcomes.
Want to add one thing to that? I'm not from Baltimore, but I'm Baltimore proud. And I've been there for almost 16 years now. And I also want to say, I can't speak for the rest of Maryland, but Baltimore City is an amazing hub of grassroots organizing. It's an everyday inspiration to me. We have some folks in the audience who maybe later. But I think that's also like the creativity, the ingenuity, the energy is just inspiring.
Like once you're in Baltimore for a little bit, you're obsessed. Sure. I'm also not from Maryland, and I just moved to Baltimore about 2 years ago, but really grew on me, and I really do appreciate the community and all the grassroots work that's done. And so with that, I want to move into some of our wins. So let's hear a little bit about what your wins have been and what solution or program have you implemented that has addressed a thorny problem or demonstrated measurable positive change.
Yeah. Community solar, that was I guess what would say, a test program that we were able to get permanent. And what it does, it allows those individuals who often not possessions just such that they can install solar panels and whatnot on the house. Or they live in an apartment or something, a townhouse, but this allows them to become subscribers. They can subscribe to community solar. And with to address or protect the LMI, the little moderate income folks, they can get up to a 20% reduction on the cost over SOS, So that makes this particular source of energy available to everyone. And here again, with those rising costs, you're allowing folks who would not normally be in a position to take advantage of that. You allow them to become participants in helping mitigate our carbon reduction and helping us try to attain some of these, I guess some folks might say lofty goals that we have, but they are equal and necessary. So it lends itself to that.
Baltimore City, our Community Resiliency Hubs program has been a nation-leading model where we are oftentimes speaking to other cities and states about how to adopt such these community resiliency hubs or integrate them into their communities. These are sites that, at least in Baltimore City, are generally run by community organizations or nonprofits, and they serve as points of access during and after disaster events. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of our community resiliency hubs served as food distribution sites, they were vaccine sites. We recently, for a couple of years ago now, received a grant from FEMA to install solar and battery backup at 16 of these sites across the city. So in the case of a power outage or prolonged energy challenges, the folks in that right in the vicinity of that community resilience really go there to use their energy, kind of like do some of their basic tasks and activities that are required. We are also redefining kind of like, or better defining, I should say, what it means to be a resilient system. And working with the national group, there's work to share what we have learned and how we're kind of like tiering models. As I mentioned, our community resiliency hubs are not based on kind of like publicly owned facilities, but many hubs in other cities across the country are. And so we've been really proud of that model, and I think really makes us stand out as a city. And it's really critical to kind of like that social aspect of resilience. There's obviously a facilities or infrastructure aspect when it comes to advancing resilience, but that really helps us strengthen our social networks and something that we know people are hearing. Trying to recover. Building on that, so at IPL, we worked really closely with Delegation Recruiting, represents County, and Senator Hester to pass last session. We passed the Warmth Act, which would pilot network geothermal, or we were calling it neighborhood geothermal, across the state of like partnering with the two main gas providers, Washington Gas, Baltimore Gas, and Electric. And the thing about this piece of legislation that we're now in the process of implementing, I actually was on a call earlier this afternoon right before I got here about like where the sites are being procured. Is that when we're talking about these like pilot programs, which, oh, shoot, let me take a step back. So it's like super high level network geothermal is like a really nifty way to like cool and heat your homes through, and not just your homes, but your entire neighborhoods at scale in a way that like doesn't use a lot of like energy. So when we're thinking about like the electrification, which is like the first wave of like cutting down our building emissions, that next step is like, how are we like making sure that like we're like, it's sustainable for the grid? It's like, this is a really nifty way to like cool and heat your home at a way that like uses such a small amount of energy. So kind of like thinking about that, like, so projects have to be in like low and moderate income like households. They have to be, and there's also like earmark 20 for like community engagement, which is constantly applying for with MEA. And like we're waiting to hear about that, but it's like doing that community outreach, which is really like our niche and like advancing that, because like when we're on these calls with like PG&E or Washington Gas, they're like, it's really hard to come into people's homes, and it's like, I'm so glad you're saying that. Like we know those people, like we've done that like relationship building. We've made sure that we have that like established trust, and it really makes sure that people who need like that assistance the most are like the first in line to get that kind of like that kind of like cutting edge like technology, and thinking about like our congregations and our all of the faith like communities that we work with, and making sure that they're a part of the process as well. Because like especially right now when you're thinking about like how everything is like a little bit dangerous for like a lot of our neighbors, like if you see like an event, a community event at like St. Camilla's Parish, it's like a lot easier to be like, okay, like maybe that's just in it.
I'd say the biggest win sounds simple, but it's really not. It's been collaboration that we've been able to have with the city, with the state. And the onus really is on utilities, on the private sector to figure out ways that we can be part of the solution. We can be one puzzle piece to addressing the climate crisis. So I had a great working relationship with MD as it relates to BEPS, as it relates to using district energy. Similar concept to network geothermal, where we're looking at a centralized location. We can then offer thermal energy and cooling for 35 million square feet of buildings in Baltimore. By doing that, and by electrifying and decarbonizing how we create that thermal energy, that's going to have a profound impact on the emissions of Baltimore City. We couldn't have done that if we didn't have a good working relationship with MDE. Lord knows they pushed us harder and faster. But that's the result of a good collaborative, honest working relationship. And then conversely, you know, MEA has been fantastic. Has been supporting a lot of our efforts as well. So it's that partnership. And maybe this goes to the earlier question too, of the uniqueness about Maryland, which is why I'm so bullish on Maryland continuing to be an actual leader on all things sustainable.
Thank you so much for sharing all those spectacular wins. So refreshing to see how so many folks from like diverse paths are able to like all work together to improve the health of our communities. It's beautiful. I also wanted to share a win from Progressive Maryland. As you may know, waste to energy or trash incineration was just taken out of our renewable portfolio standard, which I mentioned previously. And this is a win for a lot of environmental groups, and a lot of folks that have lived in South Baltimore for a very long time. And because the legislation doesn't necessarily shut down incinerators, especially in Baltimore, that are impacting the surrounding communities, impacting their health, impacting their environment, sometimes I think it's very difficult to kind of picture what that measurable positive change looks like, because it's not resulting in something material right away. But I will say, just talking to community members, seeing them celebrate the passage of this legislation, seeing them kind of tap into their own internal locus of control and their agency to then work within their communities to shut the incinerator down. I think that in of itself is kind of at the heart of implementing change. When you have people who are motivated to do that and want to collaborate with their community members. And so that is in of itself. Okay, so moving on to our next meeting. Where have you seen intersectional wins for climate work? For example, any scenarios where kind of climate resilience resulted in improving community health, or implementation has opened up new workforce development opportunities?
Okay, I'll say, well, yeah. Well, we've got for 2024, we've got the Brighter Tomorrow Act, and that bill aims at bolstering solar power in Maryland by establishing small energy generating incentive programs, so that they could you could sort of artificially inflate the SRECs, so it's a boost to those smaller companies who want to get into the business and get more deployment. We've got that 14.5% set aside for solar, and then we have not been reaching the goals that we had anticipated, but at least this bill should help incentivize that more. And of course, we all know if you want to get something off the ground, you offer incentives. And this is exactly like what this bill does. Yeah, so the other problem we've had too has been with siting, and that's a major concern, and we're trying to address the point now where we can remove some of those challenges and allow the investors who want to go out there and deploy how to produce it. If I can talk personally, one of the situations we had a couple of years ago in Baltimore County, we had an investor, that's, but in I guess you'd say my councilmatic district, we'd already had either 10 projects completed or being in the process. So my councilman said, no, most you can have is 10. But there are some other districts that zero. So I said, well, how do you come up with 10? Well, I just thought it was a round number. So, we need, we're trying to increase reduce our carbon footprint and increase renewables. Yeah. But I think this bill is going to help in that respect, remove some of the restrictions and then allow people investors to go out and do what we're asking them to do, what we're trying to incentivize us with.
So I want to piggyback, on something that Senator Brooks said about offering incentives. And I think that's sort of a sweet spot for the Maryland Energy Administration, because we are a source of funding. We are rarely the full source of funding. And so we are really looking for partners in the corporate sector, in local government, in the NGO sector, in the residential family sector, who want to do the right thing, whatever that may be. It may be putting solar panels on their roof or or canopy, it may be electrifying their buildings, it may be energy efficiency improvements. We can often bring that gap funding or enough funding to make it worth the while for a variety of stakeholders. And every day we're seeing that sort of intersectionality. We're seeing those success stories. And frankly, that's one of the things that I love about where I work is that we are really trying to put boots on the ground and money in the hands of the folks who want to do the work.
And MEA has funded several of our community resiliency funds in the past, especially Snow Meadow, the faith-based organization that it's kind of like the low standard of resiliency funds, but to add to some of the funds that then had shared, what I will say, we work with nonprofit partners who support workforce development in the environmental space and areas that are not as well installation or landscaping. So there's a nonprofit called Civic Works. They have a Center for Sustainable Careers where they kind of train folks on different sustainable or environmental skills, again, from solar installation to, and for some cases, it may be kind of like that electrification, but also landscaping. I do think workforce development, when we talk about the environmental space, it's complex, it's complicated, because oftentimes some of these labor-focused careers aren't the best jobs. They don't pay well, they don't have benefits. And it could be very much paying people at a poverty wage. But this is, the workforce is supposed to be driving our clean energy transition, and you're not compensating oftentimes that workforce well. That can be a workforce that reflects our African American or Latino or low income communities when we think about landscape communities. So when we say workforce development, I think sometimes we need to be talking also about not just the but what it looks like to ensure that we have clear pipelines for folks who are interested in environmental careers to maybe those careers that actually supports in the it's all the things that we want out of like a full time. How we benefit. Yeah, like the other kind of piece to this is that like there are like family sustaining jobs and like gas specifically. If you think about like HE&E or like pipeline workers, those are like union positions and like union jobs tend to be family sustaining jobs. So part of like what I do at IPL, I have like a labor background, but I worked at the AFL in Texas, is thinking about how to like bridge that divide, like working at the speed of our relationship building. So like for the Warrants Act specifically, like there were like labor provisions in that. Because at the end of the day, like these gas workers, like we were talking to them and they're like, I don't really care what the pipe is used for. Like if you're doing that with geothermal or you're putting gas in it, like that's none of my business. Like I still have a job. And so they've really been like good partners and like specifically on that front, like advancing like clean energy. And then that relationship carries on to like our other, like this session, we talked a lot more about like energy generation, battery procurement, which they were like really interested in, like the unions were. And so like just really fostering that relationship and making sure that we're not being antagonistic with each other, because like we do care about like what happens to them and we want to make sure that they're making those decisions for themselves. And like we're hoping that gets there.
I'm going to bring in a different perspective. I have, as an artist and a cultural worker, I have kind of different measures of success than most of the people sitting on this panel. I feel really privileged to be here with you all. And this connects to a number of things that have already been said. But in terms of intersectionality, I think it's important to remember the original meaning of that word when it was introduced into our vocabulary, and was about like real material differences between what people are facing in terms of their positionality, culture, and the economy. And it's coming from the perspective of a Black feminist thinker, cultural worker, right, who is pointing out that to be a Black woman is to be doubly, to bear a double burden, right, and that those things need to be addressed in real ways, right. So as a white leader of a cultural organization. I won't even call it an organization. We don't have the infrastructure for that yet, but it's an initiative in Baltimore City, which is a 61% Black city and has lots of other cultural diversity as well. I take it as my first responsibility to make sure that I am being accountable to partners in my kind of cultural working space, who can both bring, like, what are the important things that are happening in your communities and your sectors, that, you know, people who have a really different perspective from mine and a different life experience than mine. So that's kind of a number one, like, organizational thing. And I'm in the process right now of trying to build a, like a kind of advisory council to help with that process, especially as we move out into doing more community-based work. But our model, I would say, and the word has been kind of given back to me by some of the artists I work with, is that what we're doing is we're building webs, we're web building. And there's a lot, we have stepped into a pre-existing ecology, ecosystem of many webs of activists and artists who've been doing this kind of work for a long time. And so what I've been trying to do is to connect into those webs. One of our community partners has been South Baltimore Community Land Trust, and Toby's over there. I don't know if Toby's still over there in that room and can say hi. But they have been doing incredible work for many years that's really innovative. And like, I think some of the stuff they're doing is at the front lines, and everybody across the nation should be paying attention to what they're doing, not just in Baltimore. But like everywhere, we get siloed, right? And we get siloed in our communities, we get siloed by disciplines, we get siloed simply because of the workload that everybody is dealing with, that we don't have the time or space. So our web building is also about creating a kind of like opening a space to slow things down, where we can be together in an arts context where you get to feel the feelings, you get to hold contradictory and paradoxical truths together in the same space and not feel like you want to shut down or have to run away from them. It's a space where we are in our embodiment of our positions in the larger city and the larger world that we're working in. We are connecting to the web of life, always finding, and I'll get into a concrete example so you have a little bit of idea of some of what we do. So last fall, we put together a queer climate cabaret. I had wanted to do this since the beginning of Vital Matters, but it took me a few years to feel like I had the connections and the resources to do it. We did this at Creative Alliance, which is a wonderful cultural space in the city. And we worked together with Maryland Climate Partners, who had we had gotten some funding from them, and we decided we were gonna commission an artist to make a work that connected somehow with the Maryland Climate Plan, which is, when you think about like queer performance, you know, it's not the first thing that you think of as like climate policy and how can you put those things together, right? But we did this whole event. We had actually two people, one who lives in Baltimore, one of whom here, the creators of Pretty Boy Drag, which is a DC-based drag group. They were our MCs, and they were folks who were coming to this like really excited about participating in it, but with like very little kind of background or detailed knowledge about, you know, the climate movement or anything like that. And we're bringing in artists who have many years of making work that deals with climate, environment, the non-human world, and representing that artistically, et cetera. So you have a space in which you have a diversity that's kind of like more the way nature does diversity than I think sometimes the way people do diversity. It's like everybody's here. Like who can we get into the room, and what can we make with who's in the room? And it was a joyous, funny, sometimes like dark, you know, they were all the colors, right? But I would call that event a success in my world because it ended up being 3 hours long, which is like to my shame as a producer, but the people stayed through the whole thing. And I would think that the measure of my success is that people stay and they come back, and they come back because they're going to something that has the word climate or environmental justice or something that feels really heavy in the title, and they come and they have an experience that is a human experience, and that also connects, like a lot of our events are to the global world. We've done climate change theater action events, which involve playwrights from many countries around the world writing very short plays, and people do staged readings of these. And so we'll have, you know, a couple of playwrights representing different parts of the United States, but also someone from India and also someone from Nigeria and so on. And those are brought together with local organizations or people who are working locally. For example, Taylor Smith-Hance, who works with freepeople.org, was really passionate about letting people know what was going on with BGE with the funding of a gas pipeline through the high breaks that are happening. So it's like people are just not aware even that these things are affecting them directly, that climate choices being made on this kind of, you know, higher up in the hierarchy, right, are coming down to their monthly bills in the way that they are. And in an art space, you can have that conversation in a kind of fun, relaxed way. People can connect to it while also enjoying themselves.
Yeah. And if I can piggyback on what you said, there's a very good point you made, because oftentimes ratepayers don't think about what's influencing that particular bill, you know. And you are absolutely right. There's any type of improvement to the infrastructure and the utility company, what they call it, a rate case, then that's going to eventually end up when the PSC approves it, that's going to end up on your bill. And if you think about it, the more people get, you know, solar, then that those, what we call those distribution costs, or those structured costs, well, let's put it this way, the commodity fluctuates, you know, supply and demand, if I have that. But those fixed costs, those distribution costs, they just keep going up. And the less of people you have to socialize that cost with, then the more those people who still utilizing that particular service from the utility company, the greater that cost is going to be. Yeah. So if you're generating electrons behind the meter, you don't have to share in that cost. You're only sharing in what you're drawing off of the grid. But if you generate your electrons, utilize them, you know, with your solar panel behind the meter, then you're doing yourself a tremendous favor. For those folks who are not, then they're going to be settled. Here again, with those costs are definitely social lines.
I just want to really appreciate the beautiful point you made about art, and I think arts in the climate space are so important. And you don't do a good job at it all the time, but bringing arts into the kind of solutions that we want to implement, I feel like it's very critical to tap into that better element, social capital that we want to foster as we face these really challenging climate issues and the resilience that we talked about.
I would just, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I would say, I appreciate the question because I think as environmentalists, we are not going to penetrate these issues outside of rooms like this unless we actually make it about environmental justice, unless we make it about the public health impacts, talk about jobs. That was what we have to work with labor unions, workers, and retraining current workers to make sure that they know that they're a part of this as well. And to Senator Brooks' point, to make the economic argument. I think one of the reasons why I'm a big supporter of the Green New Deal and Taze Cortez, because I think she's done a really intentional job of making the jobs bill as much as a climate bill. And that's something we need to do. Otherwise, we're just going to talk to people who agree with us and we're not going to advance them.
Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. Glad you brought up that aspect of environmental justice kind of being at the heart of all these conversations. Without environmental justice, we can't move forward with addressing climate change. And this kind of segues into our next question, which is how have you ensured that vulnerable and underserved communities, particularly low-income communities of color, have been included in your climate programs? And I'll go ahead and start us off here. So as I mentioned, Progressive Maryland, we represent a lot of members who are concentrated in South Baltimore, folks who are low income, folks who are working class, who for years now, they may not feel like they're involved in these conversations of environmental health legislation, and who rightfully so may feel like their voices cannot be heard. And so a way in which we kind of incorporated those voices are, particularly with our last environmental justice campaigns to take trash incineration out of the state's RPS, our environmental justice coordinator, Sir James Weaver, doorknob to help communities in Carrot Hill and Brooklyn and a lot of other communities in South Baltimore. And he went around and, of course, he educated the community members on where their ratepayer dollars were going, because someone mentioned it. A lot of folks don't know where their money's going. And they weren't aware that their money was being used to fund the Orozco incinerator in Baltimore. But more importantly, in addition to educating them, we really wanted to have conversations with community members to gauge what their stories were like, what their experiences were like, bearing the brunt of living in such close proximity to this harmful entity. And so a lot of the grassroots work that we do and the environmental organizing that we do is really concentrated around putting people in the forefront of these decision-making spaces, which means involving them in the political process. And so a couple of examples how we've done that is we've facilitated conversations between community members and the Baltimore City Council. We were able to get the council to pass a resolution in support of taking trash out of the RPS. We've also made sure to highlight community voices in our rallies, in our demonstrations, any of the one-pagers that we sent out, we made sure to really highlight their stories, because that's kind of the heart of it. And one thing that my colleague, legislative coordinator for Progressive Maryland, Erica, who's in the back, shout out, she kind of pointed out to me was that, a lot of times our community members, when they look at Annapolis, they kind of see it as this daunting place. They may see it as, this place where they can't really permeate it. And we really try to facilitate situations where they feel empowered to have those direct conversations with legislators, not necessarily through other folks, but they're able to advocate for themselves. So that's kind of how we make sure that we're incorporating that underserved and overburdened perspective in the work that we do. I will let others share.
So I'll jump in. I think one of the things that is maybe special about Maryland is a lot of the programs we administer have means tests or they're income limited. But Maryland has sort of gone beyond that and has literally defined underserved and overburdened in state law, and then has basically targeted, I guess, the availability of a lot of the strategic energy investment fund toward communities that are low to moderate income, underserved, and or overburdened. And so by law, a very large chunk of the funding that the Maryland Energy Administration has to go to community-based organizations that are serving these communities, to residents within these communities, to schools within these communities. And so, by very design, we are trying to think very thoughtfully about who is being served by these funds that are frankly coming from, again, the carbon market and alternative compliance payments. It is those emissions, it is those emitters that are often disproportionately impacting these very same communities. So Maryland has very intentionally said, okay, if we're collecting these alternative compliance payments, they need to go back into service of these communities, these residents, these schools. And so that's something that we see every day with the work that we're doing.
So I'd like to talk about a project we're actually just embarking on now, because it's going to bring us in relationship to communities in Baltimore City anyway. It's a public art project, which is the first time that we're doing a public art project. It's the first time I'm doing a public art project, so it's new territory. But I'm really excited about what the framework of public art offers, because it is, traditionally, it's often like, an organization wants something that is related to its community, built in its space or on its grounds, right? And so they hire artists in, and maybe there's some activation around this, but it's mostly about the creation of that thing and that, like, walk with them. So coming from a performance background, I'm really interested in what are the ways that we can work with the community in an ongoing kind of participatory art, ritual-based way to find out what a community, we're starting with some folks in the Twins Falls. We're working, this project is a water-based project oriented around the 3 watersheds, Baltimore City and the Patapsco in South Baltimore. That's kind of the long-term ambitious goal. The right now goal is we're gonna find one community, I think it's gonna be in the Twins Falls. And we're gonna work with them kind of like in a back and forth dialogue with us to find out what their interests, needs, dreams, desires are in relation to connecting to land and connecting to water. And then invite on the basis of that, an artist who's gonna come in and create a semi-permanent structure, which we will then further activate through community activities. And so it's kind of like, think more festival than like art object, I guess. Yeah, I just wanna say, like, I feel like we need to more often pause and question the language that we're using, the way that we're framing these questions. Because just the way the question is framed, to nobody's fault, but right, this is the way we're used to talking about things, but it's a top-down, it's a center to periphery description of reality, right? And so what I'm curious about is how can an art project like this redefine what center is? But you know, what if like that's where we start instead of, you know, I know that policymakers and legislators and people who make decisions about spending money at the levels that you all are involved with, like you have certain protocols and progress and so on that you have to fulfill. But I think that this is one of the disruptions that art can do in this climate space is to disrupt some of the language. And also like in relation to this working directly with community in an art process. I'm not sure like how much we're even gonna talk about climate, but we're definitely gonna be talking about water. We're definitely gonna be talking about green space. We're definitely gonna be talking about cooler spaces, right? How do we create cooler spaces? And this leads me to one last thing I just want to mention, which is a big inspiration for this project is a film that we just showed at a mutual aid event in Baltimore. And the film is called Water is Love, and it is now available for free to stream. So I recommend that you check it out. The argument that the folks who've been engaged in the Water is Love project, it's backed up by data from around the world, is that water has been an ignored element of the climate space and the climate conversation. And it's a very powerful and very community-based way of addressing climate issues. So there's water restoration projects or water, the idea is like the water cycle being broken is a huge part of why we're in the climate crisis that we're in. And that we actually have direct hands-on, like literally hands-on ways that we can address this in very small, like on a very small community level, which can then go out to like your larger, you know, city or state or regional level, which can then connect to a continental, you know, so it goes on and on and on. It's a big dream, but it's a, I'm excited to, especially because Baltimore and Maryland is such a watery state, to connect with water as an important element in the conversation and water in community as it makes my heart feel warm.
So I just want to say thank you for that. I love that. Into climate through water. I'm an ecologist by training. I'm a water quality scientist. And it wasn't until I worked in Baltimore City on water issues and realized that many folks in Baltimore City just they don't, it's not that they don't care, but it just doesn't resonate what the dissolved oxygen is in the deep waters of the Chesapeake Bay 100 miles away. Not their top line issue. And through that work with communities and really better understanding sort of what folks do care about, that's really what brought me into the climate space. So thank you for bringing me back there. I really appreciate that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so like I feel like I think equity is really one of our core tenets, and not just for a nonprofit, like we're all striving for equity. But truly, like as an interfaith organization, like we find that like a lot of the people that we work with like care about climate because we care about our neighbors, right? Like we care about our common home, but it's like because I care about what happens to whoever at like in my neighborhood, like my literal neighbors, but also like our neighbors like in the state. And so we like sometimes like in our work, we talk a lot about like you can build your own art, but like that's not enough. Like how do we make it bigger? How do we expand it a little bit more? And I think it like permeates like our work in two main ways. So like I work on our advocacy piece, and so like we have like a director of like climate equity. And I got hired and I immediately was like, Robin, like my department is your department. Like it's just like how we're moving in tandem together. Like so when we pick like the bills that we're gonna support, the bills that we're gonna like connect with our people to, and like how we're gonna like mobilize. It's like we are thinking about like what are the impacts of these bills? Like are there like rising costs associated to this? Like is that a deal breaker for us? Like are we like making sure that like the bills that we're working on are geared to like primarily serve like low and moderate income homes? And like that leads us to like also like the union part of it, like the labor, where it's just like I'm not just thinking about like our neighbors, but also like our neighbors who are the gas workers. And then I think like our organizing like also like embodies this. Like we organize across the state. So it's like I know that there's been like a lot of love for Baltimore, and it's like and we're also like out on the eastern shore, like talking to people in Salisbury, where like there's eroding like coastlines, and they're not used to people like going out and talking to them. They're like, what are you doing here? We're like, and so it's like building those relationships and making sure that like it's not like we're really like trying to be like inclusive of like the entire state when we're doing our work, like when we're like uplifting like our voices to our network. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna date myself. There used to be this clothing store in Maryland. I think it's called Sen, but what you would say was an educated consumer. Yeah, best customer. Well, I think an educated waiter to be her own best customer. You know, we need to look and see what's behind these numbers, sorry, to learn it and get some idea of what's involved in coming up with these costs, you know. The one thing that's a given, that those costs are going to continually escalate with the advent of data centers and whatnot. That means that the demand is going to be higher. And of course, with the supply low and demand high, the cost goes up. So, and I've been to the state probably, including myself, none of us ever read our meters. We just take what's on that bill for granted and say, yeah, that's it. And perhaps we need to, I'm going to invent something that's going to give me a printout of what my usage is automatically. I know the utility companies do that, but sometimes you need to trust what and verify. And I'm saying that I'm talking about a personal experience down south. I was paying the utility bill for my mom. Of course, they had suburban gas in tanks, you know, and they'd come and fill it up. Well, I got this bill 2 weeks later, no, a month later, got another bill, but this was in the summertime. My brother's there, he doesn't cook, my sister brings food all the time. And then my sister happened to be at home that day and saw a bill on the door. So he say, 450 gallons of gas. Well, this is summertime, they didn't know usage. So then I questioned that, and then they threatened that if I turned the gas off and all that stuff, it got the whole bunch of things. But then it got to the point where I didn't pay for the guy what he did. I don't know what he did with the gas. But it didn't go into that tank. So what I'm saying, sometimes you have to trust, but you have to verify. And let's become a little bit more aware of what's going on. And so you can not only protect the environment, but protect yourself as well. So I have to just throw that out there.
I think everyone kind of like responses on the panel today reflects like how important environmental justice for achieving environmental justice in the state of Maryland and in Baltimore is not considering a project or initiative without really talking about environmental justice, being very transparent about the past injustices that have been perpetuated in the federal, state, and local government levels, as well as by the private sector. And we are really trying to atone for a lot of the history of environmental injustices. In that work, oftentimes, I think part of it is being transparent in terms of how we are making progress or not. Where we are needing to make trade-offs. It will serve in very complex decisions. And then also, when it comes to like how we're engaging, so we updated our climate action plan and our disaster preparedness plan and release-based sustainability plan in 2019. All of that depended on engagement with thousands of residents across the city. We let people's ideas, we collect the surveys, we collect the people's ideas, we what action should go in the plan. Release a draft for residents to comment directly on that. And we got a lot of feedback, we got a lot of comments. Oftentimes, I think some of that engagement, being very transparent, we see many middle-class white households who are engaging and responding. And that's a key to us, or a real clear sign to us that we have to do better in reaching engagement or achieving engagement that reflects the demographics of the city. That means we have to invest more in how we are reaching out and communicating or going political, or whatever those better engagement tactics look like. And then sometimes we just have to shut up and listen. We do hear a lot of things that may make an environmentalist uncomfortable, like people not wearing blankets or trees or solar. And if you hear that and just assuming that they don't know what they're talking about, you're missing a really important piece of the information being communicated. So when I hear that, what I'm hearing is that my community hasn't received other basic services, but somehow you can have money to provide these other services when I'm struggling. I'm living, dealing with all these other social and economic challenges. So we really do have to listen, and I think sometimes realize that I had a community member at an event once. She said she hates the environment, and I was like, no, don't say that. But I listened and tried to understand like what we think in environment were. So I think we really tried to take our climate equity goals, our environmental justice goals, and put them into action in such a way that acknowledges we will not always get it right. It is an ongoing process to figure out how we are undoing decades and generations and centuries of injustices, and understanding that oftentimes the communities that we're serving, our residents, they do know what they need, especially when it comes to kind of like everyone wants clean water and clean air. But sometimes how those concerns are communicated, it may not be the same language that we use. So being accessible in our language in ways possible, especially when you are more easily to kind of like digest the information.
And I'd say this, I know it can be disheartening, we have all these lot to go planned, we're headed, we full steam ahead in that direction. The new administration come in and sort of put a little nail in the coffin, but we cannot give up. We've got to continually move forward, and those two shall pass. So let's continue to do what we do. We need to do to protect our environment, not for ourselves, for our kids and our kids. So
can you feel like how to keep that sustainable? That was like kind of my concern is we're in this environment now where the money, the investments that were made in the past administration were there and probably sustain many of your initiatives. Let's be honest, probably not going to be to that level or any at all. How does this effort continue going forward?
Yeah, well, you're right. We might have to pause. Pause does not mean completely stop, give up on. We'll probably be back in here and be back in session probably sometime around by September. Because that's when the CR particularly has to be renewed. I'm of the mindset that we do face a bit of challenges. But my partners would tell me, son, I might give out, but up never. So we're gonna have to maintain that same attitude, yeah. Just might have to pause, or slow down a little bit, but we're not gonna give up the fight.
Yes, I said that. I think, obviously, the federal funding climate, all pun intended, it's gonna look very different in the future totally. And I think part of that is ensuring that we have more, whether it's independent funding sources, but also we make polluters pay. From everything from, whether or not it's enforcing regulations and having stricter fees and compliance requirements. But also when you think of like our waste industries, looking at things like extended producer responsibility, where the producers and the manufacturing, they pay for the waste and how it is stewarded throughout its life cycle, and not us in the public sector paying for that service with the tax dollars. I think we have to get a little bit more creative about climate financing so that it is not only federal grants. We're looking at deep and creative revenue funding models.
I just want to add to this because this is literally a conversation that is happening in my offices on a weekly basis. And my gray hair is gonna tell you how old I am. But I'm finding myself in this really sort of crazy position where sometimes I have to be the adult in the room and I literally do not like it. But the advice that I give to our staff of 70 plus is this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And we're going to continue our work. We are not going to sacrifice our values in response to policy or monetary decisions that are being made in DC. We are going to continue to do the work that we know needs to be done. And we need to breathe along the way, and we need to offer each other grace. I mean, how many times are you talking about offering grace to your colleagues at a staff meeting? I'm doing it on a weekly basis because we really need to show up, be authentic, and recognize that our colleagues are also experiencing this in very different ways. Maybe their spouse is looking at losing their job and so we will get through this, but we really need to have each other's backs and make sure that we pace ourselves. And you know what? In 3 years and 8 months, things are gonna look better. And I am now.
If I could add from an artist perspective, like I'm used to making amazing things happen on zero money, on very, 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 very little money, and almost never on a lot of money. And I work with other artists who have day jobs, who are doing what they do, and I hold it as a very high value to pay artists and make sure that I do, but it's often, I feel symbolic when I can pay someone only, $150 to participate in an event, for example. But I think that folks who are in the climate space, who are used to relying on, please don't take this the wrong way, but who are used to relying on city, state, federal salaries to do the work. There's people out there who are doing work, who've been doing it on a volunteer basis, right? As activists, as grassroots organizers, as artists for a long time. And also the mutual aid model, which I've started to Vital Matters has started doing mutual aid events. And we're exploring, what does that mean right now? Like, what does it mean to go, well, actually, we really need mutual aid. It's not necessarily like an environmental disaster that's happening. Baltimore hasn't been subsumed in, it's not underwater literally, but it is a disaster that is happening, right? That is unfolding very rapidly before us, right? So how can we strengthen? It's like that saying of when a fisherman can't go to sea, he works on his nets. He strengthens his nets. And I think this is the time to be strengthening our networks, to look for people are interested. Look me up. I will hook you up with an international climate organization where you could just sit around with your friends and read climate plays together in your living room as part of a, a global event kind of thing. There's lots of ways, and I think the creative, what you're talking about, creative, it is like big creative, like, okay, what are the new corporate connections that we could make that we haven't really explored, for example, but also like on this really sort of small scale.
I so appreciate that question, because
Okay.
I think everyone here, everyone in this room has been consumed by that for the last 4 months.
Yeah.
You don't have the luxury of waiting, 4 years if we want to get serious about it. And we actually have made some real progress up until this administration. I think a couple things come to mind. The focus on city and state climate action has never been more important. We did the first Birdo in 2017. Actually, the first Birdo we did in 2013, which was benchmarking the building performance standards. We did because, the first Trump administration, the EPA was saying, sort of hands off. So that was I felt a heavier weight on my back in terms of actually advancing really aggressive climate policy. I think that is even more crucial now. That's why it's great to see what's happening in the city and state level. Working with this private sector, like in private utility. We are not a public utility, so we serve customers who enter into contracts, like we have the same ratepayer structure as some of the others. Working with them to create a market for a decarbonized product, for example. And again, this goes to my earlier point. You've got industry that are want to, don't see ESG as a bad, 3-letter word, 3-letter initials. So it's finding that. It's also, and I think several of us touched, Ava, I think so eloquently just did, figure out how we talk to people. The person who says, I don't want to buy client because it's going to take away a parking spot, they're not our enemy. They're someone that we haven't made a compelling case to. And so we need to figure out how we pitch this as jobs, as a green jobs program. You look at IRA funding, hell of a lot more went into red districts than blue districts. And so it's making that case to folks that this is the industry. The Trump administration talks about energy dominance. I can't think of anything more dominant than offshore wind off the eastern seaboard.
Yeah.
Up in New England, we are the Saudi Arabia of wind. So good. Right. We need to do a job making that case. We can't sacrifice our focus and our morals and just existential threat. The climate crisis is, but we need to figure a way to get our message out to other people and to build that coalition going forward. But it's a great question because it's hard. It's really hard right now. And I'm hopeful. I'm an optimist, and I believe that I'm older than many people in this room. I remember acid rain.
Yeah.
The ozone layer, and it was policy and energy coming together to address this. We'll address this, but it ain't gonna be easy.
All right. I didn't call for one. But it kind of, I've been thinking a lot about what you've been saying and you've been listening. So also, I am a old science background turned banker. I will put that around. And also creative. And I entered into the environmental space from what I've learned in the last 2 years. I'm a connector and convener, exactly. That's why I've been actually to do this, time resilient communities, right? And I wrote the work into awareness, preparedness, and response. And when I listen to everything that you guys have talked about, it touches on all of that, including focusing on our most vulnerable communities. And what I'm finding is, like everything else, even in things, there's silos, right? And it's barriers, language barrier, microaggressions, but the mind where we talk about intersectionality is the press and everybody wants to make money. Incentives is all, government banking. So appreciate that piece. One of the things that has not been, you and I talked about this, that has not been on the forefront of innovation is our business community. Our small business community and also our government contractor. I was looking at the stats, I'm not gonna look at it now, but we had
think it was like 99.5, it was something crazy in Baltimore, I mean, not Baltimore, but the state of Maryland, the small businesses. But we haven't addressed, how do we start building awareness and making it uniform? Now is the time we can do this when we're looking at more local and state legislation, but being a little bit more innovative to start having like sustainable business certifications. And when I used to do government contracting, they used to say, I need you to tell me what your economic impact is. We have not gone toward resilience and environmental sustainability. Some of them, I think, for the county and school system, but everybody isn't there. So how do we start infiltrating these goals from a state perspective and bringing the small business to government contractor, which is a huge piece of income for us, to incentivize them to move forward, to bring awareness, to help them become more resilient, because we're very responsive, to prepare for resilience, educate them. And I think when we talk about LMI tracks and communities of color, everybody's talking about making money, and most of them are entrepreneurs. So how do we incentivize and start innovating in the small business, corporate sector space for those folks that are doing business with the state and local municipalities to say, hey, you gotta start doing XYZ sustainability report, or show me your metrics of this. What does that look like? Is there any talk about transitioning that? I think that would be sources of income, but also, to your point, touching different levels of community, and even legacy for wealth building for those communities to start thinking about this. It's not at the front of the mind when we talk about language, but if you talk to me about entrepreneurship, small business, those things, I can connect with you on that. I'm not going to connect with you on some of the other languages that we talk about within people.
So, well, one of the things, we started having some of those conversations to make sure that we are not just talking with the choir, that we are, pushing our boundaries a little bit. And one of the messages, I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but you talked about entrepreneurship, everybody wants to make money. Everybody also wants to save money. And so that has been increasingly part of the messaging from my organization is these are things, this isn't about how to be the greenest of the green or how to, save the planet. This is about how to save your family, your small business, your school district, how to save money. Because clean energy and energy efficiency in the long term, that is what that is about. And unfortunately, I think too often the conversation gets hijacked, but well, that costs too much to do. No, not if you look at the life cycle of whatever it is. And that's a very, very different conversation than I think we're used to when we're taught, those traditional supply and demand models and what does something cost. We're not used to looking at the life cycle cost. And so, yeah, it might be a little more expensive to build solar, but over the life of that generation facility, when the fuel is free, it's suddenly much more cost competitive, and it's going to save folks money in the long term. So it's not everything, but it's part of the conversations I think that we're starting to have. It's not just about how to be green and how to reduce greenhouse gases. It's also about how to reduce energy burdens and how to reduce costs for people.
And I would even challenge you, because that's what, it goes back to what you said. People aren't thinking about that. But if you tell me, how do I sustain my business and be resilient and make sure that my business is here in 5 years based off of COVID?
Yeah.
How do I make sure that I'm a strong and sustainable and resilient business? Use that language. I can adapt to that much better than you can tell me about green. And along the way, I will learn about green. I will learn about water. We did that with COVID. You mentioned it was like in banking. You can see everybody all of a sudden pivot. They were doing math, they did everything. Now we see everybody getting EV, the hot topic. You gotta make it sexy, unfortunately, you do. So it's the language use, right? Because they bring you along the journey. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers. You have brought that up before, and even with this is, how do we shift our communication to the community to say that I want you to be a sustainable business? What does that mean in FK? If I look at the emails that go out to the MBE, if I look at them go out to faith-based, or even the churches, it's green, it's energy, it's this. How do we make sure that the community is resilient? Oh, let's talk. Now you have an audience. We're not having that conversation. I think to your point, to bring the journey along and to really collaborate, that we gotta change the language and the way we tell our story. That's what we tell everybody now with DEI, right? You gotta tell your story a little bit different. It's still doing work. How do we start thinking about those things and some of the work that we're doing?
You're making me think a lot about, Catherine Hagel. Everybody here's read Catherine, right? Right. That like climate scientist becomes an advocate for how we talk to people about climate change. And my favorite thing about the work is like, I think this is so true, and it's just a perceptual like veil that we haven't moved through yet. You can ask anyone about anything that they care about. And if you pull that thread just a little bit more and a little bit more, you will eventually arrive at climate, at greening, and because, you know, whether it's your leisure activities in the summer, you like to drink red wine, or you love coffee, or, you know, you want your kids to not have asthma, or, right, whatever it is, climate is already in there. So like, how do we start the conversation there? This is, I'm just repeating what you already said, but like, but it could be literally anything. And I think that's the sort of curiosity that we need to approach people with, of like, what is it that you care about? Let's have a conversation and see how these things. Because the top down, like, oh, okay, the science says this and we all know this, and it's really scary also. It's like, it comes down with this feeling of fear and like anxiety producing energy that just makes everybody do this or freeze or get depressed or right, like it's like the everyday things. What are the everyday things and the ways that we can start to like just lift the veil a little? Like I don't even think it's like a big movement that has to happen. It's just like a whoops, oh there it is.
I agree with what you said. I think oftentimes what we have to do, we gotta get people to buy into something. And then become real, then it becomes wholesome, and then they get, you know, get more and more enthused and more aggressive about it. Messaging can be a great part of that solution. Just the way how we shape, focus, and tell that different story. One of the major motivators now, I think, would be associated with costs. That does get everybody's attention, you know, and I mean, even I'm a legislator, the PSC, the governor, of course, the governor appoints the PSC members, but in the Senate, we advise the consent, you know, so they gotta come through us. So our power, I guess, one would say somewhat indirect, you know, so the government say, I want this person, we'll say, yeah, hey, you know. So when we can call the before us and break them up over the code, we call the PSC and break them over the code. You know. But at the same time, we have to listen to our constituents. We got to listen to the ratepayers. But at the same time, we need them to be into just as much as, not as much as we are, but but really be into it. And then put the pressure on, you know. You listen. You know, I've seen several cuts in the budget that were achieved because of the amount of pressure put by those advocates, placed by the advocates. And, you know, we're starting the same boat when it comes to the rate, but we can do things that try to mitigate. We, unfortunately, you know, we're just very comfortable. You know, we 6% of what we do need to get that up. Put us in a much better bargaining position. But you know, I've been hearing some good conversations from my colleagues up here. And you know, we listen, we do listen. And we want solutions as well. And that means that I should go back to the district and not have a bit of federal point at me. So
terms like with the ESC, with the Water Commission, PG&E, both the gas and electric. So I just advisory committee a lot after because they're like, I don't know if everyone else knows. At least- No,
Yeah, okay,
not
good.
that, that's not, I've done it too, but just to add one more point to that, I think when it comes to the engaging small businesses in particular, I think it really is industry specific, especially when it comes to small retailers or small restaurant. Like we have a law in Maryland called organic waste diversion, HB 264, where large producers are required to divert their organic waste. However, if you're producing, I think it's under 1 ton, you don't actually, the law doesn't apply to you. So how can we the smaller restaurants or the carryouts, or even the smaller grocery stores to engage in better waste management practices that do save them money? And then kind of like, when you think of like, if you have a small kind of like manufacturing operation, or for that matter, other retail spaces, there are some policy mechanisms that we definitely want to be looking into for them to consider. I mean, sometimes it is a bit of like a very scalpel, but also there's a regulatory role there. So when it comes to like bag bans, straw bans, or phone bans, those things work. They really work. We see significant reductions in the amount of post-consumer waste in the environment. It does pass a fee or a surcharge on to consumers, and there is a role for retailers and certain businesses to play that we have to manage and have to effectively enforce and ensure compliance with. But they have to do it. They don't have a choice. So I think some of those kind of like regulatory pieces are really important. We have a really good environmental policy that revenue sources, again, being more creative about like how are we making, how are we bringing in more revenue in the face of the new federal funding realities, but also it requires a climate behavior change. And I think that's critical when we're talking about like what are the climate behaviors that we want certain industries and sectors to engage in, regulating like a utility versus the, some other businesses or even colleges and universities, and like what when we're engaging with students, we know that they care most about education students, or college and university, they want to provide a robust educational opportunity versus engaging other industries that have very specific rules that they have to follow, things that they have to comply with also particular things that are of interest.
And I just say, you're so right, what's getting measured gets managed, and that's a compelling argument. We often go some quick story. In 2013 in Boston, we did the first BERDO, which was acronym for Building Energy Reporting and Disclosure. This was 12 years ago, exactly. We love to talk about government, formerly government. But what that bill did is it mandated every large building over 30,000 square feet had to report all the utility usage. And it was very controversial. It nearly didn't pass a progressive environmental city like Boston. Because you had building owners saying this is proprietary, this is a backroom, maneuver to try to get us to lower our emissions. We don't want to share. Anyway, it did pass. And within the first year, you saw 85% compliance. And a funny thing happened. It wasn't that I was charming enough to try to win these people over. It's that they realized, well, if I turn my escalators off in my building in the middle of the night, I'm going to save some money. Bill. If I have motion censored lights, same thing. If I switch to low flow, so it was making that economic case. There was almost a rivalry among a lot of developers and building owners to say, well, we got our information in early, we're less than you. And then there was a market for tenants who wanted to have that green bed in places where they rented. So there's a huge opportunity there. And and I'm feeling more hopeful about this time in history, because that's, I think, a way we can maybe start to lay more groundwork, not ceding the work that we need to do, but coming at it from a slightly different perspective.
It wasn't your charm, it was your socks.
Yes,
That was my boiling daughter. And I can say this, sometimes with the like I said, some of the industries out there, there's recycling slabs film. And they get beverage containers out of the waste stream. And one of the organizations I thought I would got from when I could visit that recycling center, and I was surprised with the answer. But they were looking at that as the revenue stream. And if I were to take that waste out of the revenue stream, Now it's gonna reduce their what? Revenue. So that's, wow, I just never thought about it that way, I thought the bill was a good bill, it's something that I did when I was a lad, made myself again, you can find a soda pop bottle anywhere because you get 5 cents to buy it. For bottles, and they got a lot of that stuff out there. But to have a recycling center, close that bill, and then we got the DMVs involved and some still fighting that bill. I might give out, but.
I'd like to hear more about the work that you guys have done and what you see as the way forward on climate adaptation. It is not an area that has gotten as much attention as mitigation. It is so needed. The impacts are not just coming, they are here. It's the same kind of business case, climate risk management, save money. Investments in climate change adaptation have return on investment on the order of 4 to 1. But there's so much need, and I just would love to hear, what are the resilience hubs doing? What resilience work are you funding with that carbon market funding? What are you guys doing? And given where we are right now, where do we go?
So I think there is quite a big problem when it comes to adaptation, especially when you look at national floodplain codes. The FEMA regulates the National Flood Insurance Program, so we manage that for Baltimore City. And basically they outline when you build in a floodplain, when you build in the bay, the 1,000-foot buffer of the bay, you have far stricter regulations to support flood prevention. But also to avoid any threat or future damage to that property and to human life. And in that process, we, at least in Baltimore City, we have far stricter regulations than the federal minimums. And we also try to do a really good job, and the National Flood Insurance Program requires doing outreach to residents to educate them about how to get flood insurance, how to navigate that process. And then I will honestly say we haven't had the conversation yet about strategic retreat, or when do we stop building, or and that's a longer term conversation. But we are doing a lot to fortify existing structures and buildings. Additionally, when it comes to adaptation, a lot of nature-based solutions are driving that forward. We'll be working on the city's first watershed master plan this year. And so we're really excited about that and bringing on watershed analysts to do that, and really want to bring those nature-based solutions along with the flood mitigation and prevention strategies to better understand how can we enhance the coastal resilience of the city overall. I think more and more to the specific question about adaptation, oftentimes we are addressing a single climate issue in particular projects, or if we are, if you are building a building and you're able to get it being certified, oftentimes considering some of these other ways to fortify that structure or to support resilience. Yeah, I do think there is a patchwork of different policy and regulatory tools at the state level, at the local level, as well as federal tools when it comes to building codes and more aggressive energy conservation and efficiency standards. But I do think that we do have to with the arts and with more creativity kind of figure out how do we solve for multiple climate challenges and make that the requirement. So it's never just an energy project, but it's an energy project that also mitigates the effect and the public health impacts of extreme heat. Or how do we ensure that we are not just when the topic of water came up, not just preventing flooding and better managing stormwater runoff through nature-based solutions, but we're actually providing people access to nature and fostering social cohesion and at the time and connecting people to the arts. So yeah, I do think there is some progress that we need to make there, absolutely. But I think a lot of cities have made significant progress and been using different tools to further adaptation.
Amen.
ask you a follow-up question? I think you probably know more than I do about the Reinvent Middle Branch project. Reimagine Middle Branch, which is largely privately funded.
There was a big FEMA grant, $30 million FEMA grant that, BRIC grant that leads to funding that, and then we have like local impact districts that collect casino funds. And so, those casino funds typically, benefit certain areas. So, there's one from the South Florida region.
So I bring it up because they're like part of that project involves building out marshland, involves like, greening areas, and I'm wondering like to what degree are they in conversation with also sustainability about the climate impacts?
So have a Reimagine Middle Branch manager on our team. And so we work really closely with the South Baltimore Gateway Partnership. So thank you for bringing that out.
That's big territory.
Yes, it's an 11-mile shoreline restoration project in South Baltimore that's connecting people to the border, anchored to environmental justice, and really doing a lot to ensure that that kind of like the role that the water plays in that community is highlighted as a great asset. The South Baltimore community is kind of like, it can feel a little cut off from the rest of the city. So reinvesting in this shoreline as opposed to like, our Inner Harbor gets like the most investment, and is in like really building that South Baltimore waterline up for this community that is predominantly like working class community that hasn't always received that level of investment. It's really critical. There will be wetlands that are installed as part of that project, as well as different kind of like trails and parks that are coming. So we're really excited about it, and work really closely with the team who are coordinating that. But I would definitely say that again, that's a huge kind of adaptation strategy. And we have a trash wheel in South Baltimore. Our local celebrity in Baltimore is Mr. Trash Wheel. Yes. Okay, so Professor Trash Wheel and the West. But yeah, in that these trash wheels, they actually do take trash out of the to help support cleaning up those rural babies. And so yeah, there's and I sometimes I do struggle with the terms resilience and adaptation, because sometimes it's like I will hear people say like Baltimore's resilient, but it's like, yeah, because there was no other option. It's like, things were like you had to just continue to deal with like the very unfortunate environmental exposures and the injustices that many residents didn't have a choice to move or to choose another option. And so while obviously like definitely want to enhance resilience, but I think it wants to ensure that all communities can adapt to the changing climate. But I think we also need to acknowledge like these conditions are not okay. Like we really need to reverse the trend, which feels like a very all order in these things. But yeah, I feel like we have to improve the conditions, and so I want people to be resilient, but that's not to suggest that the conditions that they were ever provided were okay. And I think we need to really kind of, yeah, that's something I struggle with.
I think that was a great question. I think Maryland could be, say, a national leader in resilience, by I say combining science, innovation, and community engagement. We can not only adapt, we can thrive. We just have to be very, very strategic about doing that, and let's adjust across all fronts, on all levels, and do what I think not only what we should do, but what we should to protect the environment. Yeah. But that was a great question.
So I'm gonna be blasphemous, and hopefully with this crowd, it will at least be appreciated. I think that Maryland can be a national leader, but we haven't yet sort of met our potential. Because I think you're right, the investments in adaptation, in nature-based solutions, in preventing flooding, urban heat. We haven't been making those investments. And I think, you know, Maryland demonstrated their capacity for leadership in the way that we have addressed cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay. And the sheer raw human power and dollars that has gone into that initiative is mind-blowing. But we, and this is where the blasphemy comes in, you know, as a former water quality scientist, the very technical model on which we rely is so narrowly focused on the cost per pound of nitrogen removed that we almost don't know how to incorporate things like community benefit or resilience or climate moderation. And so we have a 40-year history, and I was a big part of it for this 20, where we were so laser focused on water quality in the deepest section of the bay that I think about all the time we lost. Where if we were thinking more intersectionally, if we were thinking about, you know, now the term of art is co-benefits, if we were thinking about those things 20, 30 years ago, where might we be? And so, you know, on my own agency, we're the energy administration, so we are sort of limited in terms of what we can put money toward. We have a Department of Natural Resources that puts money toward more nature-based things and trees, and those are good. But wouldn't it be great if we were weaving these funding resources together and we were thinking about the climate plan and the water quality plan and the flood plan all together? And for some reason, we just haven't quite figured that out yet. I am also an optimist. I have to be. I think you have to be to work in this arena. I do believe we can get there. I do see some signs, but I'm going to be honest and say that is still very much a need. And we need everybody focused on how we can weave those things
I
together.
mean, there is a need for that intersectionality. There is a need for system change, right? Those things are really hard, right? But that's the space that we need to move into now. And at the same time, resilience and climate change adaptation, those are not like a sector in and of itself. They impact every single thing that we do. So with regards to kind of the language and whatever, there's such an opportunity to meet people exactly where they are with what concerns them. And it can be also a great entry point for all of this other stuff that you guys have been talking about, sustainability and mitigation, et cetera, because this is where you're going to really meet people where their needs are.
I think we're gonna have to conclude the section. I'm so sorry. I'm on track for time. We will have the networking event at 5 o'clock. So if you have other questions, feel free to join there. Just want to give everyone a few minutes to maybe share some closing remarks.
Yes, well, thank you again, to all the sponsors and all the amazing panelists for being here. I would just say, yeah, I agree with the point about optimism and being a climate optimist is something that we can really lean into. And then also, I think during these next 3 years and 8 months, I think we have to be in community with one another. We have to really take care of ourselves. In some of our most vulnerable communities, whether or not that's planting a tree. If you are so inclined to go to Baltimore this week and check out Nature Everywhere Week, it's our first ever Nature Everywhere Week, where we'll have volunteer days to plant trees and rooftop and basically and support pollinators across the city. But I think it's those kinds of opportunities to get our hands in the soil, to connect with other people, and to build our social capital across the community that we
dwelling that are going to make all the difference. And I am optimistic that we will come out of this period with resilient, and able to tackle some more complex issues.
Well, thank you all. This has been a great conversation, a great effort. Getting to meet more of you. Thank you for convening us. This was a great group. I learned a lot, and I hope everyone here did as well. As a proud Bostonian, Baltimore will always claim a very, very special place in my heart. I'm there once a month now for work, and it's great. So this summer, this spring, come to Baltimore, go to the restaurants, go to the stores, support this incredible city, make sure that it continues to thrive and continues to be the national leader that we know that it is. As it relates to the climate crisis, we have work to do. It can be disheartening, it can be frustrating, difficult. We can never, ever lose sight of the fact that this is one of the most consequential things that we want to do. And we will have setbacks, we will have roadblocks, but at the end of the day, there's nothing that we can't do. We have to work together, bring more people into this tent, and really work with the private sector, work with the public sector, work with NGOs, and continue to not lose sight of the enormity of what's ahead of us. But the enormous problem and absolutely can be done.
I will also say thank you for convening this panel, this conversation. Has really been inspiring and it reminds me of why we're all here. You know, I have a favorite, I think it's an African proverb that says something along the lines of, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think about that often, because I think that has to be the foundation for the work that needs to be done. We have to figure out how to do it together, and not just with the usual suspects or the folks of means, but we have to figure out, I think, to your point, how we engage and involve everyone. And if I knew how to do it, I'd be doing it. You know, but I'm just like everybody else in this room. I'm working really hard on the piece that has been bestowed upon me, and I encourage you all to continue to work really hard on your pieces, because that's how the puzzle comes into view as something more meaningful. It's when you put all of those pieces together. So we can't get discouraged. We can't think, oh, you know, it's not enough. Because when we all come together and we all do this work together, it will absolutely be enough. But it's never going to stop. It's something we're going to be doing for the very, very long term. So thank you all for doing your piece, and for being here today to be a part of this conversation, because that in and of itself is inspiring to me. Thank you.
First, we thank our hosts for giving us. Thank you guys for being here. It's been a really great thing. 2 hours. I know I talked a lot about our advocacy, but I'm going to use my closing remarks to just kind of quickly. My colleague Josh, not to put him on the spot, is here. If you are interested in going solar in your home, if you're a part of a congregation that would like to go solar, we have like a full-time staff that is dedicated to that. We also, if your congregation is like pretty large and it's at some point, if you're in DC or in Maryland, and you're going to be subjected to like the building energy performance standards, yes. We also have full-time staff who will help you with that stuff. So it's just like we have resources, and I know that there's not a lot of people that do that kind of stuff. So we'd love to be in touch, and we'll see some of you there at the happy hour. Bye.
Well, I want to also echo the same thanks to the host and my amazing panelists up here, man. It's great information that I'm going to be going back with as well. You know, we're all in this together, and we're going to have to figure out and how to make it happen. Even with the challenges that we're facing, and what I often say that this is normal, you know. That's just normal, things keeps going up, you know. But I keep talking back on some things that my pops used to say. There was one time that he thought I had bristled at him. But he said, son, there are only two things between us. He said, atmosphere and your fair. He sucked up the atmosphere. So what I'm saying, the difference between us and these challenges, atmosphere and our fair. Let's go out there and do what we know we can do. And not quit. Make sure we do what we have to do to protect this environment. Thanks.
I want to echo the thanks of everyone for the organizers. For this is a beautiful space. It's really been very lovely to be here in this space, and thank you to the audience for your questions. And to all of you. My remarks are actually gonna be an experiential thing that I'm gonna invite you all to do with me. We've been sitting for a long time. And I'm gonna make you stand up.
But take out whatever is you need to take out, but not. And just make sure you have like some space next to you so you can kind of move your arms a little bit. And this is a basic, very small, but I find very, giving kind of resiliency strategy, somatic strategy. I'm a somatic movement therapist and all the other things that I do. So I like people to recognize, remember that they are actually a body, that they are in a body and they are a body, and that everything that we've been talking about moves through our bodies. So let's just take a moment. First of all, just like tune into your vertical dimension. So feel your connection. You can use your arms if you like to the floor and to the ground, all the way beneath this building, beneath the concrete of the city. I don't know how far we need to go down to this new water. But like, feel your connection to the ground and feel your connection in your upper body to the sky. And to that openness and that incredible realm of possibility of the sky. And maybe for you, the sky has an association to faith, or to God, or to spirit, whatever it might have an association to ancestors. Whatever it is, just welcome that sky energy down into your body, welcome it into your heart, welcome it into your belly, and it's meeting with the energy of the ground. So here we are in our vertical dimension, and this vertical dimension is you. This is everything that you bring, everything that you have learned in your life. It is your gifts, it is your challenges, it is what makes you you, what makes you unique in this movement that we are all in together. Breath into your vertical dimension. And we're going to spread it a bit, find our horizontal. We're going to find our horizontal dimension. Do what you got to do. You might find yourself hugging somebody next to you. That's totally fine. So in the horizontal, like if you reach out a little bit, we might almost touch the person next to us. If we reach out further, we'll find like this connection makes a whole big circle. If we reach out far enough, it makes a circle all the way around the whole globe. But let's think about our circles of community. Let's think about the people who are standing right by our sides in our work that we do. Let's think about our families, our friends, our coworkers. Let's think about who the people are in our circle of work and our circle of doing in this kind of space. Let's think about who's in that circle, who's not in that circle. And just take a moment to consider why the people who are in the circle are in the circle. Or why the people who are not in the circle are not. And just think for a moment. Is there anything I'd like to change about that? Is there anything I'd like to change about who's in my circle? And how could I do that? This community, right? Network, this is our support. This is for me. This is like how I'm going to get through it. This is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to get through it. I've got my body. I've got my community. And now let's take a moment and go to the horizontal. Oh, we didn't breathe it. Breathe into it. Into the horizontal, feeling your width, wide, open,
with your lungs, with your breath. Good. And now come back to your center. Let's find our sagittals in my fancy somatic language. Sagittal, it means forward and back, our forward and back space, right? Our sagittal dimension. This can mean a lot of things, the forward and back space. The space behind you maybe represents in some way where you come from. So history, your history. Could be ancestral history. I often think of it as like, who are the people who've done this work before me? Who are the people that taught what I need to know to move forward in this work, who are at my back? Whether they're dead or alive, right? They've already joined the realm of the ancestors. The people at your back, also the more than human beings who are supporting us every day, the trees that allow us to breathe, right? The water that nourishes us, all of these things. And now consider the space before you as your future. And think about who are the people receiving what you bring to that future? Who are the beings receiving what you bring to that future? Who are the communities benefiting, bringing to that future? And sometimes that feels overwhelming, so I invite you to make this as big or small as you like. Come back into the center of your body, to the place where all of these lines intersect, the center of your body. And I'd like you to imagine like a little seed that's right there in the center of your body. That seed is an intention that you have that is about next steps. And it could be an intention that reaches very far into the future. It could be an intention about a phone call you're going to make later today, or something you're going to do for yourself to make sure that you have the resilience that you need to keep moving forward. Whatever it is, just hold it there for a moment. Together, we're going to make it so. We're taking a big breath. When we exhale, we're going to stop and we're going to say, "Ha." Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Just speaking as an individual not affiliated with any organization or institution, a coalition. I think for a young woman of color like myself, it can be intimidating to kind of come in space. So I just want to say thank you. And I think that, a lot of young folks in my generation, we kind of witness the unprecedented and anthropogenic impacts of climate change, whether that be, around the world, the forest fires, the hurricanes in the United States, the extraction of natural resources in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the extraction of natural resources in Palestine, the water availability issues in Kashmir, and various other environmental issues around the world. We kind of slip into this humorous perspective, and we feel like we can't do anything, we're debilitated, and really coming into this space and being surrounded by so many people who are doing some incredible work. I feel like I'm so inspired by the fact that we all kind of possess the antidote to climate resilience, which is hope. I think the most beautiful thing you can do is to have hope. Hope for a better future, hope for progress, and hope for a better world. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'm excited to collaborate and network with all of you at the networking.